Everyone believes I killed her sister. I let them believe it. And before you decide what that makes me, you need to hear what really happened that night. They say the forest remembers everything. Footprints. Blood. The way a body falls. But forests lie. Or maybe they only tell the parts that are easy to see. When they found the blood, it was already drying into the leaves. No body in sight. Just silence where a scream should have been. They didn't ask who arrived first. They didn't ask who left last. They only asked one question. Why was I there? I was the alpha. I was close enough to matter. And I was already guilty in their eyes before I opened my mouth. There are moments in life when time slows down, not because something dramatic happens, but because you realize every word you say will destroy something you love. That was my moment. I saw the accusation form before it was spoken. I saw the relief on a few faces. A name makes fear manageable. Mine was convenient. I remember chains. Cold. Heavy. Not because I fought, but because I didn't. Heads turned away. Someone whispered her name. Someone else whispered mine. The two sounded wrong together, but no one questioned it. What I didn't say mattered more than what I did. Because there was another presence in that forest. Close enough to hear the breathing. Close enough to know exactly when to step back. But that detail stayed locked inside me. They called my silence proof. Days blurred into nights. Nights into full moons I couldn't escape. I learned what guilt does when it has nowhere to go. It eats slowly. It waits. It reminds you of every face you couldn't protect. Somewhere beyond the walls, life kept moving. Bonds shifted. Grief settled into something colder. And someone else stepped into the space I left behind. I heard about it long before I saw it. This is not a confession of murder. It's a confession of choice. A choice made in seconds. A choice that lasted years. And if you're listening to this, it's because that choice is no longer holding. Not everything buried stays quiet. Not everyone who smiles is innocent. And not every monster leaves claw marks behind. Stay with me. Because the truth doesn't begin with blood. It begins with who everyone trusted. And who they never thought to question. Before everything broke, there was a version of us that believed the future was settled. That's what people never understand when they hear stories like this. They imagine cracks. Arguments. Warnings carved into the walls. But there were none. There was laughter instead. Routine. The kind of peace you stop noticing because it feels permanent. I was alpha, but with her, I didn't need to be anything at all. We walked the forest paths at dusk, when the air cooled and the ground still held the day's warmth. She talked more then. About small things. About plans that didn't need urgency. I listened, half aware of the rhythm of her steps, the way her hand always found mine without looking. The bond between us wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It simply existed, steady and unquestioned. The pack felt it too. Harmony isn't something you declare. It's something you live inside without effort. Fires burned longer at night. Voices carried easily. Even disagreements ended quickly, as if no one wanted to disturb what we had built. Her sister was always there. She trusted me in the quiet way that matters more than words. She teased me when I took things too seriously. She brought food when meetings ran long. Sometimes she sat across from me at the fire and watched the flames like she was memorizing them, like she understood that moments don't last just because you want them to. If there was tension, it stayed at the edges. My stepbrother rarely spoke when we were all together. He didn't need to. His presence announced itself in other ways. In how conversations softened when he arrived. In how laughter shifted pitch, then resumed too quickly. In the way his eyes lingered a second longer than necessary before moving on. No one called it strange. People rarely do. They file discomfort away and keep going. At night, when the pack slept, I would wake with a sense that something had changed. Nothing obvious. No sound. No movement. Just the feeling that the air itself was listening. I blamed responsibility. Leadership does that to you. It teaches you to expect loss even in peace. She told me I worried too much. Her sister agreed. She said the forest had moods, just like people. That sometimes it watched. Sometimes it rested. Tonight it's resting, she said once, smiling, as if that settled it. The moon rose and fell. Days passed. Life stayed full. We shared meals. Stories. Long stretches of silence that didn't need filling. On nights when the fire burned low, we sat close enough to feel each other breathe. Those were the nights that felt safest. The nights you convince yourself will repeat forever. But there were moments I couldn't explain. A branch snapping where no one stood. A pause in conversation when my stepbrother entered the circle. The way her sister sometimes stopped mid-sentence, as if listening to something far away. Once, I caught her looking at him with an expression I didn't recognize. Not fear. Not anger. Something more careful. Something measured. When I asked, she smiled and shook her head. Nothing, she said. Just thinking. I believed her. Trust makes you generous with explanations. The night before everything changed, the pack gathered as usual. The fire crackled. Food passed from hand to hand. Someone told a story we'd all heard before, and we laughed anyway. She leaned against me, warm and familiar, and for a moment I felt foolish for every restless thought I'd had. Her sister sat across from us, knees drawn in, watching the sparks rise into the dark. When our eyes met, she smiled. Then she looked past me, into the trees. I followed her gaze. Nothing moved. Just shadows layered over shadows. Leaves shifting in the breeze. The forest doing what it always did. Later, as the fire burned down and people drifted away, she stopped me. Just a hand on my arm. Light. Brief. Be careful tonight, she said. I laughed. Asked her of what? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes searched my face, like she was trying to decide how much to say. Then she stepped back, the moment gone. That's all, she said. Just, be careful. I didn't understand it then. I told myself it was nothing. A passing thought. The kind people have and forget. But the last thing her sister said to me still follows me. And every time I replay that night, every time I trace the steps that led us there, I wonder what would have happened if I had asked her to explain. Because some warnings don't sound like warnings at all. Sometimes they sound like ordinary words, spoken too softly, on a night that feels safe enough to ignore them. The night it happened did not announce itself. There was no sudden change in the air. No warning sound. No feeling that something terrible had stepped into the world. It began like every other night, quietly, almost gently, as if it didn't want to be remembered. I remember leaving the fire later than usual. The pack had thinned out. Voices faded one by one. She stayed behind to speak with someone else, and I walked alone, following a familiar path I could have traced with my eyes closed. The forest accepted me the way it always had. Leaves underfoot. Cool air against my skin. The moon climbing higher than I expected. It was brighter than it should have been. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Not alarming. Just noticeable. The kind of detail you register and then dismiss because nothing else seems out of place. Then I heard it. A sound doesn't need to be loud to tear through you. Sometimes it's the sharpness that matters. The way it cuts cleanly, then vanishes. A scream, broken off halfway, swallowed by the trees before it could finish becoming real. I stopped moving. There's a moment after a sound like that where the world holds its breath. I waited for another cry. For footsteps. For laughter that would turn it into a mistake. None came. Only the thud of my own heart, suddenly too loud, echoing in my ears. I ran. Branches lashed at my arms. Roots caught my feet. The forest blurred into streaks of shadow and silver light. I remember the smell before I saw anything. Warm. Heavy. Metallic. It filled my mouth, my lungs, my thoughts, until there was nothing else. Blood has a way of pulling you forward even when your mind is trying to catch up. The moon broke through the canopy as I reached the clearing. It washed everything in white. Too clear. Too exposed. The ground was torn up, leaves scattered, earth darkened in places it shouldn't have been. She was there. Her sister lay still, eyes open, staring at nothing. The world narrowed to that single image. Sound dropped away. Time stretched thin. I remember kneeling. I remember calling her name once, maybe twice. I don't remember hearing my own voice. What I do remember is looking down. My hands were shaking. They were wet. Red soaked into the lines of my palms, under my nails, smeared across my skin as if it belonged there. For a moment, I didn't understand how it got there. The memory didn't connect. There was a gap where something should have been. I wiped my hands against my clothes. The stain spread. It didn't help. Around us, the ground told a story I couldn't read properly. Marks cut into the soil. Deep lines, too uneven to be tools, too deliberate to be chance. I stared at them without knowing why my chest tightened, why a cold weight settled just beneath my ribs. I stood. I knelt again. I looked around, searching for movement, for any sign that someone else was still nearby. The forest had gone silent. Even the insects had stopped. Then I heard voices. Running feet. Shouts. Torches breaking through the trees. The pack arrived all at once, light flooding the clearing, eyes widening as they took it in. I stepped back without thinking. My heel caught on something and I stumbled, hands reaching out to steady myself. That's when they saw me clearly. Blood on my skin. On my clothes. On the ground beneath me. No one asked how long I'd been there. No one asked what I'd heard. Their gazes went from her sister's body to my hands and stayed there. I tried to speak. The words tangled. My mouth felt full of ash. I said her name again. Someone pulled me away. Someone else covered the body. The moon watched from above, bright and indifferent, as if it had already seen enough. When she arrived, the world shifted. My mate pushed through the crowd, breath hitching, eyes wild with fear that hadn't yet found its target. She fell to her knees beside her sister, hands trembling as she reached out, then froze. She turned slowly, as if she already knew where to look. Our eyes met. I saw it happen in real time. The way grief searched for meaning. The way shock reached for something solid. The way the blood on my hands finished a story no one had heard. She didn't scream at me. She didn't strike me. She just stared, like something inside her had snapped into place. When she looked at me, she already knew who she blamed. And in that moment, standing under a moon that refused to dim, I understood how easily truth can be buried beneath what people think they see. They didn't give us time. Grief moves faster than reason, and fear moves faster than both. By the time the torches circled the clearing, the night had already decided how it would end. Voices rose. Names were shouted. Someone demanded answers that no one was ready to give. She stood over her sister, shaking, hands slick with blood that wasn't hers, eyes refusing to leave the stillness on the ground. When she finally turned back to me, the sound she made didn't feel human. It tore out of her chest, raw and broken, and it landed on me like a verdict. She accused me without saying my name. It was in her voice. In the way she backed away, as if I were something she didn't recognize anymore. In the way her hands curled into fists, then pressed against her mouth, trying to hold the pain inside. The pack closed in. Someone grabbed my arm. Someone else shouted that they had seen the marks in the dirt. Words collided. Justice. Alpha. Responsibility. Blood debt. Each one struck harder than the last. They weren't wrong to demand answers. They were wrong to believe they already had them. I searched the faces around me, looking for one that would question what they were seeing. One that would pause. One that would ask what I remembered. My stepbrother stood near the edge of the circle. He said nothing. No shock. No outrage. Just stillness. His eyes stayed lowered, respectful, almost heavy with concern. If anyone noticed him, they took his silence for grief. They didn't notice how carefully he avoided my gaze. She screamed again. This time my name broke free. That sound did more damage than any chain ever could. I stepped forward without realizing it, hands lifting as if I could reach her, as if touch might explain what words couldn't. The pack surged between us. Someone pushed me back. Someone else shouted that I was dangerous, that the blood proved it. They were right about one thing. I was dangerous. Not because I had killed her sister. But because I knew who had. The truth pressed against my teeth, desperate to escape. I could have said it then. I could have turned, pointed, shattered the shape grief had taken and forced everyone to look somewhere else. But I looked at her instead. At the way her shoulders shook. At the way she struggled to breathe. At the way her world had already collapsed and was still falling. If I spoke, she would have to hear it all. If I spoke, she would have to know who stood beside her every day. If I spoke, the ground beneath her would give way completely. So I made a choice that would cost me everything. I lowered my head. The noise dimmed, just a little. Confusion rippled through the circle. Someone demanded that I explain myself. Someone else called my name again, louder, angrier. I said the words they were waiting for. They felt heavy. Final. As soon as they left my mouth, the night seemed to lock them in place. The pack exhaled as one, a terrible sound of relief disguised as justice. Fear had found its shape. Grief had found its target. She froze. For a moment, I thought she might come toward me. Instead, she staggered back as if struck. Her face crumpled, not in anger, but in something worse. Betrayal. The kind that rewrites every memory it touches. I tried to tell her I was sorry. The guards were already pulling me away. The pack moved quickly after that. Decisions made. Sentences spoken. No trial. No questions left unanswered, because no one wanted answers anymore. They wanted closure. They wanted the night to end. As they forced me to my knees, the ground felt cold and solid beneath my palms. I focused on that sensation, on the scrape of dirt against skin, because if I didn't, I would break. She turned away. That was the hardest part. Not the chains. Not the shouts. Not the way my title dissolved in seconds. It was the way she covered her face and walked in the opposite direction, as if I had never stood beside her at all. I watched until I couldn't see her anymore. The pack called it justice. They called it necessary. They called it mercy. I called it survival. Because I could survive prison. I could survive chains. I could survive years of silence and stone. I wasn't sure I could survive her knowing the truth. And as they dragged me from the clearing, away from the body, away from the life I had built, I felt something settle deep inside me. Not peace. Not acceptance. A promise. That one day, whether I was ready or not, this lie would demand to be paid for. And when that day came, it wouldn't ask permission. The first night in the cell, I counted every heartbeat as if it were a punishment. Stone pressed against my back. Iron against my wrists. The cold seeped into places I didn't know could feel cold. My own breath sounded like someone else's, echoing off walls that had no mercy and no memory. I tried to remember the forest. The warmth of her hand in mine. The sound of laughter I thought I'd left behind. But the shadows were faster. They wrapped around the memories until I wasn't sure they had ever happened. Full moons came and went. I marked them on the wall with fingernails, not because it mattered, but because the act gave me the illusion of control. Each mark was a reminder that the world still moved outside my cage. That the nights continued. That the pack went on without me. I remember the first full moon alone. The howl escaped before I could stop it. It tore through my chest. I felt it in my bones, in my teeth, in the space between heartbeats. I tried to still myself, pressed my hands against the floor, tried to ground myself in silence. The chains rattled with every movement. They became extensions of me, as if the iron was learning to pull against my will. I wrote letters. Hundreds of them. All unsent. Pages filled with confessions, apologies, things I couldn't say aloud. Words I wanted her to read, words I knew would only make her hate me more if she ever did. I left them in the corners of my cell, hidden under scraps of cloth, hoping someday they might matter. Some nights I would lie awake and imagine her voice, hear it clearly in the silence, calling my name, asking why. I could almost see her silhouette by the fire, or leaning on the forest path, waiting for me. Then the illusion would shatter. The silence would return. The iron would rattle. My own breathing sounded loud enough to wake the dead. Sometimes I woke to the sound of claws scraping the stone, though no one was there. Sometimes I felt eyes on me in the dark. I told myself it was the moon, that it was hunger, that it was my mind fracturing slowly. The worst nights were not when the chains held me. They were when I imagined her learning to live without me. Watching her laugh again, trusting someone else. Smiling when I was gone. The thought pressed against me more than any weight. The thought burned more than any loneliness. The chains could not contain it. And yet, the cage did not just hold me. It taught me. It taught me patience. It taught me silence. It taught me how the mind twists itself when guilt is too heavy to carry freely. Some nights, I spoke aloud. Whispered apologies to walls that did not answer. Promises to moons that could not respond. I counted days in my head. I traced the marks on the walls with trembling fingers. Each notch, a reminder that the world moved without me. That life went on. That she was still out there, learning to breathe, while I remained trapped in every inch of darkness. I could feel the pull of the bond, though it was faint. It throbbed beneath the surface, sometimes gentle, sometimes painful, like a warning or a heartbeat that wasn't mine. It reminded me that the connection remained. That the love had not died, even if she had to pretend it had. The nights grew longer. The moons grew higher. And each time the howl left my throat, it reminded me that I was still alive, but alive in pieces. Not the whole me. Not the me she once knew. The worst pain wasn't the chains. It was knowing she was learning to live without me. And every day, in the echoing silence of that cell, I wondered how long it would take for her to forget the man she once loved, and how long it would take for the truth to find me again. Outside, life continued. Or at least, the world that I had left behind did. I don't know when I first realized that she was beginning to move on. It wasn't sudden. It didn't arrive with a thunderclap. It arrived quietly, like smoke slipping through cracks in a door, leaving traces I couldn't ignore. She cried alone at first. In the corners of the pack house, in the forest paths I had once walked with her. I imagined her hands shaking as she pressed them to her face, trying to hold the pieces of herself together. Every sound, every sigh that carried beyond the walls of my cell, became a reminder that I was missing the life we had built. And then he came. The stepbrother. The one who had never spoken a word the night of her sister's death. He appeared at the edges of her grief like a shadow stepping into the light, gentle, patient, careful. He offered words no one else had dared. A hand on her shoulder. A voice low enough to soothe the raw edges of her sorrow. I heard him whisper things she wanted to believe. Things that bent the truth without breaking her entirely. He never loved you, he said. He never cared enough to stay. And she believed him. I felt it through the bond, the pull, the tether we shared, stretching thin. Not broken. Not yet. But every day it frayed a little, a thread slipping silently away. I could feel her heart learning how to exist without me, even as part of her still remembered. The symbols of my presence, the marks we had left on the forest, the insignias we had worn together, even small reminders in the pack, began to vanish. Erased quietly. Replaced with his. Every trace of my life with her was being overwritten. And I could do nothing. Because the truth was still trapped inside me. Locked behind the walls of stone and iron, behind the memories I couldn't reconstruct fully, behind the nights when the moon reminded me of what I had lost. I watched her in dreams, in the fragments that my mind allowed. Saw her standing under the same trees where we had laughed. Saw her smile hesitantly at him, the one who had filled my place. And yet, in the quiet moments, I felt her searching for something she couldn't name. A presence she had once relied on and now couldn't reach. It was not enough. He was careful to fill her space with comfort, with attention, with repetition, with lies she was desperate to accept. And the cruelest part. She wanted to accept them. I heard fragments of her voice, carried on winds I couldn't reach, saying my name only in passing, as if testing it, hesitating. And then she stopped. She began to call it something else. He made sure of it. My name erased, not from her heart, but from the surface of her world. I imagined the nights she spent alone in bed, clinging to memories that were slipping through her fingers, as I spent my nights in silence, counting moons, clawing at the walls, writing letters I would never send. And I understood something then. Hatred can grow faster than love. Misplaced trust can solidify into armor that nothing can penetrate. And grief, left unchecked, becomes a weapon aimed at the one who did nothing but survive it. He told her I never loved her. And she believed him. Even as part of her still reached for me, even as the bond whispered faintly beneath the surface, she chose to let him fill the empty spaces. I could feel it from behind these walls. Every laugh she gave him. Every tear she shed without calling for me. Every small gesture of care that replaced what had once belonged to me. The world I had known, the life we had shared, was being rewritten. And I was powerless to stop it. Except, of course, I was not powerless. Because the truth does not stay buried forever. It waits. And when it rises again, nothing will be the same. The gates opened with a sound that should have been freedom, but it wasn't. Chains fell away, metal clattering to the ground, but the weight didn't leave me. Not really. It clung to my bones. It clung to the memory of her face, the look she gave me the night her sister died, the way she had already decided who to hate. I stepped forward, expecting the world to welcome me back. It didn't. The air smelled the same, but it felt wrong. The paths I had walked 100 times now seemed narrower, lined with shadows that weren't there before. The trees whispered, or maybe I imagined it. The wind cut differently. The sun fell in strange patterns. Everything was familiar, but every detail pressed against me like a warning. The pack, they avoided me. Heads lowered, voices hushed. Eyes glanced at me and darted away, careful not to linger. Recognition without welcome. Respect without comfort. I was here, but I didn't belong. Not yet. And then I saw her. I froze, like the world had slowed for a heartbeat I didn't have. She was laughing. Not at me. Not with me. With someone else. A hand brushing her shoulder. A tilt of her head I didn't know. The sound was small, intimate, the kind of laugh that belongs to the people who share a life, the life I was supposed to have returned to. I looked closer, straining to see her face. The crowd, the firelight, the decorations. They blurred into one image that kept her just out of reach. I didn't need to see her face to know. I knew by the way she moved, by the way he moved with her. And that's when I saw it. The markings. On the posts. On the arch of the doorway. On the ribbons and banners that fluttered in the wind like proof I wasn't ready to face. Wedding markings. Dates written in careful strokes. Names whispered into permanence. Symbols I had once seen with her, now replaced with someone else. My stomach twisted. My chest tightened. My hands clenched. I wanted to call out, to reach her, to stop this before it went too far. But I stayed silent, because even as rage and grief rose like fire, I remembered the truth that had carried me through chains and full moons. The truth, some things cannot be undone with force. Some things must be unraveled quietly, piece by piece. I moved forward anyway. Step by step, through the crowd that barely noticed me. Through the decorations that celebrated a life I was no longer part of. Through the laughter that tore at the edges of my soul. Every sound was amplified, the clatter of cups, the rustle of fabric, the faint scent of her perfume carried on the wind. It all reminded me that I had been absent for years. That the world had kept moving, and I had been left behind. And yet, I noticed the details that no one else did. The slight pause in her laughter, a fleeting shadow across her eyes, a hesitation in her posture that told me the bond between us had not completely broken. It was there. Faint. Fragile. Waiting. But I couldn't reach her yet. Not here. Not now. I stepped back, letting the crowd blur around me. My boots scuffed the ground. My hands flexed, remembering the feel of the chains I had carried for 3 years. My heart pounded, equal parts hope and dread. Because I knew what I had to do. And I knew, more than anything else, that the world I returned to was not the world I left. And that was the moment I realized. Freedom was only the beginning. I should have been the one standing there. The moment I saw the banners, the flowers, the careful symbols etched into every surface, something inside me snapped, though I couldn't hear it yet. My breath caught. My eyes burned. Every muscle in my body screamed to move forward, to stop it, to reach her, to pull her away from the life she was building with someone else. And then I saw him. Stepbrother. The one who had never spoken when it mattered, the one who had smiled while her world fell apart, the one who had whispered lies into her ears, soft enough to fool her heart. He stood at her side, hand on her waist, steady, confident, claiming what should never have been his. She laughed. Not at me. Not even aware I was there. Her laughter hit me like a blade. Warmth and memory clashing against the coldness of reality. I froze. It wasn't just the sight of them. It was the knowledge that I had been erased. My place taken. My bond replaced. My mate standing there, choosing him, willingly, happily, while I remained a shadow outside the circle. I stepped closer, instinctively, but the crowd moved with me, blocking the view, separating me from her in ways I hadn't anticipated. And when I finally caught her eyes, I realized she wasn't seeing me. She looked at me like I was already dead. Every word I might have spoken, every name I might have called, every plea I could have made, gone. The space between us was solid. Cold. Immovable. The stepbrother leaned close, whispering something I couldn't hear, and she smiled at it. And I felt the full weight of what I had lost, not just the bond, not just the love, but the possibility that she might ever trust me again. Every instinct I had screamed at me to act. To run into the crowd. To tear him away. To claim her back. But I didn't. Because I couldn't. I had spent 3 years in chains, surviving the world outside, surviving her absence. I had learned patience. I had learned control. And I had learned that rushing would ruin what little leverage I still had, the faint, fragile thread that still tied us together. I stayed in the shadows, watching. The decorations mocked me. The music, the laughter, the care in every detail, it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for them. And yet, I noticed the cracks. The hesitation in her hand when it brushed his. The brief flicker in her gaze when she looked at the crowd. The way her grip tightened for a fraction of a second, as if remembering a presence she couldn't name. It was there. Faint, almost invisible. But it was not enough. I realized then, with a cold clarity, that everything had changed. The pack, the village, the life we had known, it was gone. She had been told stories about me I could not defend against. She had been shown a version of reality carefully curated to make me a ghost, a traitor, a man who had abandoned her. And she had believed it. I wanted to call her name. To scream. To shake her, to make her remember. But I stayed silent, because the wrong word could ruin everything. Even my presence was dangerous. Stepbrother smiled at her. She leaned into him. And I realized that every second I hesitated, the lie grew stronger, the wedge deeper. The wedding date was close. Soon, very soon, this life would be cemented. Symbols carved into wood, vows spoken aloud, the world watching. And I was standing outside it all, invisible, silent, powerless, or so it seemed. But even in that moment, I understood something crucial. She may have looked at me as if I were already dead. But I was still breathing. And as long as I breathed, as long as the bond between us whispered faintly beneath her awareness, nothing, no lie, no ceremony, no stepbrother, would ever truly erase me. And that is when I realized, the war for her heart was only beginning. Even from a distance, I could feel it. A pull beneath the surface, subtle at first, almost imperceptible. A whisper in the blood, a vibration in the air between us. The bond, our bond, had not died. It never would. It stretched across space, across time, across the walls that had kept me imprisoned for 3 years. It was painful. Not physically at first. At first, it was the ache of absence, the ghost of her warmth I had felt in my arms. But soon it became sharper. It cut into my chest. My ribs tightened as though something were clawing from within. My heart throbbed in rhythm with a force I could neither name nor escape. At night, it became a presence in dreams. I saw her. Not clearly, not fully, but fragments. A flash of hair, the tilt of her head, the motion of her hands as if reaching towards something just beyond reach. And she saw me too, though she didn't know it. I reached for her in those dreams, and each time the connection pulsed with resistance. She fought it. I could feel the confusion in her mind, the anger she directed at herself for feeling what she shouldn't, for longing for something she thought had died. And it hurt me. Pain isn't always external. Pain is sometimes the body reacting to the truths the mind refuses to admit. Every time we neared each other in these shared moments, it flared, electric and raw, forcing me back as though the bond itself was punishing me for being so close while she refused to see me clearly. She would wake in sweat, heart pounding, gasping for air as if she had just fallen through the forest floor. I would awaken in my cell, clutching my chest, trying to quiet the storm that ran through me. Even in sleep, even when the world insisted we were separate, we were not. I began to notice the subtle changes in her days. Hesitation in her steps, a flicker of hesitation when she smiled at him. Moments where her eyes seemed to search for someone she didn't know was watching. Small, fleeting gestures that made my chest tighten until it felt like iron. And yet, she resisted. The bond was screaming. It pulled, it yanked, it reminded her of everything she wanted to forget. It reminded her of me, of what we had shared, of the life she had chosen to leave behind in the shadow of lies. And she was trying not to listen. I could feel her confusion, her anger, the way her mind waged war against what her heart and instinct still whispered. Every heartbeat of hers that I felt across the distance was a question, a challenge, a threat to the false world that had been built around her. And the pain, it wasn't just mine. It belonged to both of us. Shared. Echoed. Amplified. There were nights when I imagined stepping into her room, feeling the warmth of her breath, the weight of her hand against mine. But each time, the bond struck first, a reminder that our connection was both weapon and tether. It punished proximity before permission. It demanded restraint when restraint was impossible. I realized then that freedom would not come from chains falling away. Not from my return. Not from her forgetting the lies that had kept us apart. Freedom would come when the bond itself forced her to see the truth. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt hope. Because the bond never lies. It cannot. It was alive. And it would not be ignored. I never expected to see it. Not here. Not now. Not after everything. The village was quiet, the way it always seemed when something was hiding just out of sight. I moved slowly, careful not to draw attention, letting my eyes sweep over corners, doorways, shadows. And then I saw it. A relic, small but unmistakable. A piece of cloth, darkened with blood, tucked behind the stepbrother's private quarters. Not enough for the world to notice. Not enough for anyone else to understand. But enough for me. I froze. My hands curled into fists, nails digging into palms. My mind raced as the blood on that scrap told a story no one else had the courage, or the clarity, to read. He had slipped. Not on purpose, not entirely, but enough to leave a thread. A clue. A confession waiting to be discovered. And my mind ran through possibilities, sharp and fast. Every lie he had whispered. Every stolen glance. Every careful manipulation of her heart. It all pointed to one truth I had refused to face fully until this moment. He had planned it. Every detail of her sister's death. Every accusation I had carried silently for years. Every shadow he had cast over her life, over mine, it had been deliberate. To steal her. To make her hate me. To replace me. I crouched in the dark, listening. The stepbrother spoke softly, not knowing the words would reach me. Not realizing that every whisper was a blade slicing through the false story that had held us apart. I did it, he said. She had to hate him. She had to turn. Only then would she be mine. I heard her name, but it was not spoken with love. Not with remorse. Just calculated ownership, as if everything in the world had been measured to serve him. I realized, standing there, heart hammering in my chest, that she hated the wrong man. Not me. Not the one who had spent years in chains, protecting her, keeping silent to spare her pain. But him. The one she trusted. The one she allowed into her life, into her heart, into her home. The rage that surged was different from anything I had felt in prison. Not the quiet, simmering anger of confinement. Not the dull ache of absence. This was sharp, immediate, a cutting edge that made my hands tremble. And yet, I stayed in the shadows. Because if I acted too soon, revealed myself too quickly, the truth could slip through my fingers again. The bond pulsed in warning. Every fiber of me screamed to reach her, to undo the lies, to stop the wedding before it was too late. But the bond reminded me, patience was power. Timing was survival. I watched him move, confident in the knowledge he thought was hidden. I saw the faintest hesitation, the way his shoulders stiffened when he realized the letters he left behind, the clues he had tried to bury, might be uncovered. I felt it all, the years of lies, the twisted schemes, the quiet manipulation that had turned love into hatred. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I knew exactly what I had to do. She had loved me once. She still did, though she didn't realize it. And she had been robbed of the truth. I pressed myself against the shadows, silent, unseen. Let him speak his own guilt aloud, let his own arrogance betray him. Let the evidence, small, damning, impossible to ignore, speak for itself. Because the moment had come. The moment where the bond, where the truth, where the years of silence, would demand its reckoning. And I was ready. I didn't plan for the moment to be quiet. It wasn't quiet. It never is when truth collides with lies built over years. I waited in the shadows, letting him speak, letting the evidence speak. Letting the bond pull at her, faint and insistent, while she still clung to what she had been told. Then I stepped forward. Her eyes found me first, wide, disbelief etched across her face. And in that instant, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. I spoke. Every word measured, every syllable heavy with the weight of 3 years in chains. I told her the truth, piece by piece, careful to let it sink, careful to let her see him, the stepbrother, the man she had trusted, exactly as he was. The first reaction was confusion. A flinch, a step back, her hands trembling. The bond pulsed stronger, more insistent. She felt it, I could tell. Couldn't deny it. Every muscle in her body went taut as though she were hearing something she had always known, but had been forbidden to acknowledge. Then came the horror. Recognition. The understanding that the life she had been building, the laughter, the comfort, the trust, had been stolen from her. That the man she had loved, the one she had allowed to occupy the space that belonged to me, had orchestrated her pain. She screamed. A sound so raw it tore through the night. The pack froze, caught between shock and disbelief. Their murmurs, the steps of those who rushed closer, faded into the background as I watched her collapse, trembling, hands clutching her head, tears cutting lines through her dirt-streaked face. The stepbrother tried to intervene, tried to reach her. He reached for control. He reached for excuses. I didn't move. I let the pack restrain him. Let the weight of his actions fall on him as it should. Let the truth press into every corner of the room, every shadow, every witness. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Her voice was gone, replaced with sobs and gasps, the sound of a heart unraveling. And I realized something in that moment, the damage of lies takes longer to undo than the damage of chains. I knelt again, not because I was defeated, but because I understood. Because even now, in the center of chaos, I had to give her space to feel, to process, to survive the revelation. The pack erupted into motion around us. Shouts, questions, accusations hurled at him. The stepbrother struggled, restrained, his own arrogance crumbling as every lie was exposed, every manipulation laid bare. And through it all, I watched her. Her eyes, wet and wide, searching. Looking for me. Trying to reconcile the man who had suffered and remained silent for her, with the one she had been told to hate. She didn't forgive me. Not yet. But the bond. The invisible tether that had survived years of separation, of manipulation, of grief, quivered between us. Stronger now, louder now, impossible to ignore. It ached in both of us, reminding her of what she had felt, reminding me of what I had carried silently. And I realized then, it doesn't matter that she doesn't forgive me today. It doesn't matter that she screams, that she turns, that she falls apart. The truth cannot be erased. The bond cannot be silenced. The stepbrother had been exposed. The lies laid bare. The pack in chaos. And I was still kneeling. Waiting for her to see. Waiting for her to remember. Waiting for the moment when hatred would turn back to recognition, when confusion would turn to understanding, when she would finally know who had loved her, and who had stolen everything in her life. The room trembled with the weight of it all, but I stayed, still, silent, unbroken. Because I knew this was only the beginning. The forest was quiet. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of understanding. I didn't approach her immediately. I couldn't. The weight of everything, years of absence, of lies, of grief, of chains, still hung between us, almost visible in the air, almost tangible in the space where her gaze refused to meet mine. She stood under the moonlight, alone, the faintest tremor in her shoulders betraying the storm inside. The pack had given her space, and I followed their silence, moving cautiously, letting the bond guide my steps. It pulsed again, stronger now. Not a scream this time, but a heartbeat, steady and insistent. She felt it too. I could sense her hesitating, breathing shallow, as if afraid to trust her own senses. But she couldn't ignore it. I knelt a short distance away, hands pressed lightly against the forest floor, letting her see me without threatening her, letting the years of silence speak in the subtle rhythm of my presence. It took time. Longer than I expected. She circled, paced, touched the trees, the leaves, as if trying to anchor herself in the world that had been stolen from her. Her gaze flicked toward me, then away, then back again, every movement a battle between memory and reality, between love she had buried and the hatred she had been forced to feel. And then, slowly, the walls began to crumble. She spoke, barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of months of grief and revelation. Why? Her voice broke, shaking with the mixture of sorrow, anger, and something I hadn't heard in years, recognition. I didn't answer immediately. I let the bond do the talking. I let the connection we had survived all these years reach out and touch her mind, her heart, her soul. Subtle at first, a whisper, a memory of warmth, of laughter, of hands entwined in the dark of a forest. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders loosened. And for the first time, she stepped closer. Hesitant. Testing. Feeling. Trusting what she had once felt, even if she had forgotten the full measure of it. I reached out, slowly, carefully, letting my hand hover near hers. And then, finally, our fingers brushed. The pain, the rage, the grief, all of it surged in that touch. But beneath it, something else flowed, unbroken. The bond healed a fraction, the knot that had tied us through years of separation and suffering loosening, allowing warmth to seep back into the spaces it had never truly left. Her eyes searched mine, wide, uncertain, and I could see the trembling in her lips, the hesitation of a heart still learning to trust. Slowly, I closed the distance, careful, deliberate. When our foreheads met, a shiver ran through both of us, the past and present colliding in that single point of contact. She let out a soft breath, and I felt the years of tension melt for a moment. The bond hummed stronger now, pulling us closer. And then, as if the world itself had paused, I leaned forward, gently pressing my lips to hers. It was tentative at first, a question, a test, but she responded. Slowly, carefully, until hesitation gave way to recognition, grief gave way to relief, and the love we had both tried to bury surged back into life. We pulled apart just enough to breathe, our foreheads still touching, hands entwined, eyes locked. And then, as if the forest had been holding its breath for decades, she wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a tight, trembling hug. I held her as though I had never had the chance before. As though the years of chains, of lies, of separation, had all been training me for this single moment of raw, unfiltered connection. The bond thrummed between us, steady, warm, insistent, a quiet proof that what had survived everything could survive anything. We didn't speak for long. Words felt fragile, unnecessary. The forest carried our silence, and in it, we rebuilt what had been lost. One step at a time, our hands remained intertwined, our bodies close, our hearts remembering the rhythm that had never truly stopped. The moonlight streamed through the trees, calmer now, softer than the nights that had haunted me in chains. It illuminated her face, and I saw it clearly, the confusion giving way to understanding, the anger fading into recognition, the love that had endured every test rising again, delicate but unbreakable. The choice was hers. Always hers. And for the first time in what felt like eternity, I knew she would make it freely. The bond, once screaming in torment, now hummed softly, a promise that what had survived the years of chains, of lies, and of grief, could survive anything else. And I knew, deep in my chest, that the love we reclaimed, born of pain, loss, and endurance, would be stronger than the hatred that had once threatened to destroy it. I took her hand, and for a moment, it felt like the first time we had ever touched. The bond hummed softly beneath our skin, a quiet reminder that what was lost could be reclaimed, that love could survive even the deepest betrayals. But the night was not quiet. Not truly. The forest whispered around us, leaves rustling like distant warnings. Shadows clung to the edges of our vision, and somewhere beyond the trees, the world waited. The pack, the memories, the lies, they hadn't disappeared. They were still there, lingering, like a pulse beneath the surface, reminding me that peace was temporary, fragile, and easily shattered. I looked at her, and in her eyes I saw what I had always feared, the remnants of pain, the echoes of hatred that had been forced upon her. She smiled faintly, a flicker of trust, but it was not complete. It could not be. And I understood, in that instant, that some wounds run too deep to fully heal in a single night. The moon hung low, partially hidden behind clouds. Its silver light washed over us, softening the forest but not erasing the tension that still clung to the air. I could feel the bond stretching between us, alive, insistent, but even it could not erase the truth that lingered. That truth, that darkness, waited. I took the blame once, I said, my voice low, almost a whisper against the quiet of the trees. I would do it again. But some sins don't disappear, they wait. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The words were enough, carrying weight into the space between us. The bond pulsed in acknowledgement, and I felt it, her hesitation, her fear, her lingering doubt, but also the faint spark of something stronger. Something that could survive the shadows. We stepped forward together, slowly, into the darkness, letting the moon guide us just enough to see our path. Every step was deliberate, measured, as if we were walking between two worlds. The life we had reclaimed and the dangers that still lingered unseen. Behind us, the forest seemed to exhale. Not relief, but acknowledgement. The events of the past, the lies, the manipulation, the heartbreak, they had happened. They existed. And yet, we moved forward anyway. The clouds swallowed more of the moon, dimming the light, leaving the forest half in shadow, half in silver. It mirrored the truth of our lives, the bond had survived, yes, but the world had not forgiven. The past still whispered. The stepbrother's deceit, the pain, the fear, they were not gone. They were only paused, waiting for the right moment to resurface. I glanced at her, and she looked back, eyes wide, unsure, yet trusting just enough to take another step. And in that moment, I knew the story was far from over. The bond would pull us through the next trials. It always had. But the darkness beyond the trees, the secrets that remained unspoken, the sins that had been buried, they waited. And I, like her, would have to face them again. Would you have let the one you love hate you, to keep them alive? I asked softly, letting the question hang in the night like a ghost. There was no answer, only the pulse of the forest, the fading light of the moon, and the quiet certainty that our story was far from finished. We walked on, hand in hand, into shadows that were neither safe nor certain, and the bond between us thrummed in quiet defiance against the world that had tried to tear us apart. And somewhere behind the clouds, the moon watched, knowing that the next chapter had already begun.